made continuous by the family. Richardson, Pitts, Poindexter. Theirs is a rich legacy rooted in the Deep South, at a time when lives were harder but simpler, where belief in God and family was paramount to survival, when slavery ruled the day.
In slavery time, and my grandmother, Nancy, she was sold to the Richardson, and she went by Richardson, but her sister went by Simmons, but I forget what her sister was named. And it was just two sisters, and they raised up a whole lot of children over there on the ridge, and they went from there everywhere. My dad had a brother Freshman. He had a brother Jeffrey, and they went away. One of them went to let me see, what's the name of that place? What in Texas? It might come to me after a while, but anyway, he went away, and we never heard from him no more.
My grandmother was the issue of an unknown white plantation owner, and her mother was a young slave girl. It was a custom back in those days for the plantation owner to show his hospitality by giving a visitor, a young slave girl, to be his bedmate for the night. And most of the time she would be a young virgin. This happened to this would be my great-grandmother, and she bore my grandmother.
Her name, Cherry Pitts, and her husband, J.C. Poindexter.
My mother and father had 7 children, 2 boys and 5 girls. My father was a preacher. He was pastoring 4 churches at the time, at different times. And my mother was the homemaker. She stayed home and took care of the children.
My grandfather kind of treated her like one of his children. I think she was younger than, quite a few years younger than he was. And he kind of treated her like one of his children.
My dad was a person, he always believed in people working, but he didn't believe in working himself. He thought it was his job to see that everybody else worked. And I see that, and furthermore, I'm about to forget to tell you. See, my dad, he was a preacher and a school teacher. He did both. He preached and he taught school also. But when he was around the house, the only thing that he did was look for something else to do.
He owned property there in Alabama, but the whites didn't feel that blacks should own property. So it was illegally taken from him.
Everybody in the family went 2 miles from home to work because my father had lost the place he bought, and they took it. They went to Selma. The brothers of the man that sold him this place went to Selma and bought his contract and took that land away from him, and he had to leave there.
Loss never dissuaded J.C. and Cherry Poindexter, and their 7 children grew up knowing the value of work, and more importantly, the value of family. Their names, Johnny, Rosie, Lula, Irene, Willie, Sharitha, and George.
George is the youngest. That's him. And he was always wanting somebody else to do something for him. And he was petted. And Lula was next. And she ran away from home and married at the age of 17 and left all the rest of us at home. And I'm next. Well, I was the slowest one of them. But I followed Rose until she graduated from school. She graduated from Selma University. And my sister Sharitha was next. Well, she's the one that had to stay home and take care of him and take care of the one she brought in the world. And Irene was the fastest and the smartest one. Papa would always take her out of school and carry her to his school after she got up some side to have concerts for him. And finally he had me to come do a concert with him. But he never would get Rosa to do nothing because Rosa was too, I don't know what, that's the oldest one now.
I knew Aunt Willie very well. Also, Aunt Willie lived in Cincinnati, Ohio. And my father every year would travel to Cincinnati or to West Virginia to visit his sisters. And growing up, in fact, when I was very young, I went to school in Cincinnati, Ohio. I went to high school in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I stayed with my Aunt Willie for approximately 2 years when I was going to junior high there. And I recall her working in the bakery at the time. She was a baker for one of the largest hotels in Cincinnati, Ohio. And quite frequently, she would always bring the pastry home at night so that we can have it to eat.
One day I asked my Aunt Willie, and I said, I just cannot make this pie crust. It's terrible. So finally, Aunt Willie said, well, come over and we'll spend all day, if it takes all day, to teach you how to make this pie crust. And I went over, and it almost took all day, but I finally learned.
Aunt Lula used to like to play bid whist. And Aunt Lula could play some bid whist, and she played bid whist all night long. And if it was any way for Aunt Lula to outbid you, Aunt Lula was going to outbid you. If you said, I bid 5, Aunt Lula was going to say, I bid 6. And if you say, I bid 6, Aunt Lula was going to say, I bid 6, no trump. She would love to bid and love to play them cards.
Uncle Johnny, I always looked at him as the head of the family. After my grandparents passed, he was the oldest son. And we all like to visit Uncle Johnny. We would visit him during the summers. Uncle Johnny did not have any girls. He just had two boys, Julius and Albert. And Julius and Albert are my double first cousins because their mother was a Poindexter, and naturally their father was a Richardson.
I can remember going to visit Aunt Cuda for the first time after she was married for the second time. And I had visited her when she was married the first time, but I don't remember too much about that. But the second time, I remember the first time I visited her, she had bought some cornflakes, and I'd never had cornflakes before. And I thought those were the best things. They were so good, and that just stuck in my mind, you know, that one thing.
I learned a lot from my mom. She had 10 children, and she could stretch $1 so far, farther than anyone I have ever seen. We didn't, have a lot of money when we were growing up, but we had all the things that we needed, and most of all, we had a lot of love.
We married away from home. Everybody got away from home, and our mother was going from child to child. And she ended up with one of her grandchildren in Cincinnati, Ohio. And all of us got together that time for the first time since we split all at once. And after we buried my mother, we sat down and I told my brothers and sisters I wanted us to see each other once a year. Bring your family and let's meet together and have a family reunion. And they said, okay. And that's what we have done for the last 47 years.
My mother and her sisters and brothers started it when my grandmother died. They decided that every time they got together, it was for a sad occasion. And they wanted to set up a time to meet once a year and, you know, for a happy occasion so they could say hello to each other pleasantly. And I think it was Aunt Willie's idea, really. But anyway, that's how the reunion started, and that was in 1947. And then we've been having reunions ever since, every year.
Wherever I am, you are. For you are a part of me just as I am a part of you. And for that, I thank you. And I love you.
I just feel a certain amount of pride, being part Richardson, part Poindexter, and part Pitts.
To be a Richardson, it means that you keep in touch with each other. You give each other advice. You teach them the right thing to do to live.
It was a cemetery right behind the church. And we were walking around and we were looking, and every headstone there had Poindexter on it. And it was just kind of an eerie feeling to see all my ancestors there. I think humans need to feel like they belong someplace. And family is the first group that you belong to. And that's the last group you belong to, really.
Anytime anyone in the family was faced with any serious problem, The Richardson was always ready to come to the rescue.
You should always care about your family. You should always take care of your family. Always love your family. Because if you aren't the kind of person that loves and cares about your family, you can't love and care about others.
I wouldn't have anything else but that last weekend of June in order to get together with the Pitts, the Poindexter, and Richardson.
Richardson, Pitts, Poindexter. A family rich in tradition, a family committed to family.
The day is past, and gone. The evening shade of peace. Oh,
If they could look back on us now, is there any such thing as, you know, the old saying said they would turn over in their grave? They might would get up and walk if they could look back and see what they left here and see what these people had done from their seed. Yeah, they would get up and walk